Welcome to Meet the Author, where you can join in on insightful conversations with best-selling and award-winning indie published authors. Your hosts today are Rob and Joan, who themselves are indie published authors, book publicists, and paranormal investigators with Tampa Bay Spirits, based in Tampa Bay, Florida. Thanks for dropping by. And now, on with the show.
Hi, I'm Rob.
And I'm Joan, and we're so really glad that you're here as an audience, whether you're listening to the pre-recorded audio or you're watching the pre-recorded vodcast. We're really happy that you decided to join us today and be in the audience.
Indeed we are. Indeed we are. As you can see, this is a pre-recorded episode. Our guest today is all the way in Israel, so wanted to we had a little bit of a time difference there, but we wanted to make sure that his message gets out. Wanted to remind everybody before we get started that every Thursday night at 9 o'clock Eastern Time here in the U.S., WDJY-FM 99.1 in Atlanta broadcasts our show. And if you wanted to listen, if you're not in Atlanta and you still wanted to listen, you could go to WDJYFM.com on Thursday nights at 9 o'clock Eastern. Saturday nights, 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time is Episode Rewind, where we play old past episodes. And you don't, if you want to get caught up and you're not doing anything, tune in there. Wednesday nights at 7 o'clock is Meet the Author Live. Every Wednesday night, 7 o'clock Eastern Time. So right here where you're watching this
right now,
show,
which
right
is
now.
a Wednesday night at 7 p.m. Eastern
Exactly.
Time.
So
same place.
In the interest of time here, let's get rolling.
Okay.
And we want to introduce Mr. Ellis Shuman. Hi, Ellis.
Hi, it's great to meet you finally.
Yes.
I know. After all these years.
Yeah.
We've been in touch online in different social media aspects, but finally get to meet face to face.
Yeah,
I know.
it's
fun.
Yeah, there you go.
It's the
great.
best part of this show.
Yeah, it is.
Getting
right?
to meet people that
Yes.
we've known for a long time and feel like we know because, we're constantly promoting each other on social
That's
media.
for sure.
So
Yes.
it's really
Right.
fun.
Well, before we get to the question of the day, can you tell us a little bit about your career and about yourself?
Okay. So first of all, I'm glad that you've invited me to join you. I'm born in the United States. I was born in Sioux City, Iowa. At the age of 15, my parents made a major decision to move our family to Israel, to Jerusalem, Israel. This was because we were Jewish, and my parents were very supportive of the Jewish state. My high school years were in Jerusalem. I served in the Israeli army, where in Jerusalem, I met my wife-to-be. We were founding members of a kibbutz, a communal settlement in Israel's southern desert. That is where we started a family. We had 3 children born on the kibbutz, but then we moved to a small community outside Jerusalem, Neve Ilan, which is today basically a well-to-do suburb of Jerusalem. On the kibbutz, I worked in agriculture. Moving to Neve Ilan, I worked in the hotel industry for many years, and then I gravitated to online marketing, always having this desire to be a writer in the background of my mind. My job in online marketing was based in a company in Tel Aviv. And then one day my boss surprised me, telling me that my job would be relocated for 2 years to Sofia, Bulgaria. And I had 1 week to decide whether I would accept that position or someone would be appointed and I would be replaced.
Wow.
So at the age of 53, my wife and I made a major life change decision. We moved to Bulgaria. By that time, our children had grown up and moved out. Our parents were still capable of caring for themselves. And we found someone to house sit our 2 cats. We had 2 cats. That time we had 2 cats. So we moved and lived in Bulgaria for 2 years. And I know this is going to be background to your next question. We lived in Bulgaria for 2 years, and then our contract ended. My contract ended. We came back to our home in Israel. And here's our home. Here's our family. Our granddaughters are here in Israel. And I've continued to write. In my spare time, my hobby, my passion has always been writing.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Isn't it?
How much time did he give you to make up your mind?
1 week. 1 week.
And how far is Bulgaria from where
Israel.
you are?
It is actually only a 2-hour flight. It's not that far from Israel. My wife said she would have been more ready to accept a relocation offer in England or someplace where they speak English. But in the end, because Bulgaria was so different from anything we had ever experienced in our life, it was such a worthwhile experience.
Yeah. Okay. It's good. You've experienced life in the United States, life in Israel, and life in Bulgaria. I think everybody should move out of their homeland for a period of time anyway. I think it opens your eyes that, you're not the only pebble on the beach. That
Right.
There are other societies that maybe operate differently than the one you're used to, and that's good. Good to stretch yourself and learn those things and live like that.
So most of your books are about Bulgaria, and I guess my question is, why Bulgaria?
Okay, so I explained how I got there. We came back to Israel, and my heart remained in Bulgaria. I couldn't stop thinking about Bulgaria. The experiences were so unique. In Bulgaria, for that 2-year period of time, my wife and I traveled extensively around the country. Bulgaria is a very beautiful country, stunning nature, mountains and forests, rocky and sandy seashores. It's on the coast, on the Black Sea coast, rivers, picturesque villages everywhere. Bulgaria is a secular country, but with a high regard for its religious heritage. There are many monasteries all over the country, and they attract visitors and pilgrims alike. And all of this was in addition to the colorful and rich Bulgarian traditions and culture and history, which we all learned about in a very short time, 2 years. We couldn't see everything, but we experienced so much, and it just made such an impression that when I came back to our home in Tel Aviv, in Israel, and I returned to my job in Tel Aviv, my heart remained in Bulgaria. So I wanted to express this special connection we had with Bulgaria, that I had gained in Bulgaria, with people who maybe like yourselves had never considered traveling to Bulgaria. Maybe it's not on your bucket list of possible destinations. Maybe some people don't even know where Bulgaria is on the map. So I wanted to share this with people, primarily from the West, Westerners, who could be potential tourists to the country. And I began writing nonfiction travel reports about my experiences, where to go in Bulgaria, how relatively inexpensive, affordable it is to visit Bulgaria. Even today, it's a relatively affordable destination, and what you can get for your money. And I began writing book reviews of modern Bulgarian literature. I don't think people are too much aware of Bulgarian literature. There's not a lot that has been translated into English, but just last year, a Bulgarian novel won the International Booker Prize as an internationally recognized work of fiction. So I began with nonfiction, but then I've always been drawn to writing fiction. So the next thing I began writing was suspense novels set in Bulgaria. Always Bulgaria was the setting, and people reading my writing would be introduced to the country through my words. So
what was your first book about Bulgaria?
My first book was Valley of Thracians. It was written, I think, self-published in 2013, maybe 3 years after my return to Israel. The story is about a Peace Corps volunteer, an American Peace Corps volunteer in Bulgaria who goes missing in the country. He cannot be found. His American grandfather decides against all odds to go to Bulgaria and search for the boy. It's a young man. And he experiences Bulgaria as a tourist visiting Bulgaria with a mission, and he has to track down his grandson. And in the process, he encounters Bulgarian culture, Bulgarian tourist sites. Everything is leading him on a trail to where his grandson is located. Whether he's still alive, whether he's well, that is what the grandfather has to find out. So that is a suspense novel set in Bulgaria, which was welcomed by people who didn't know Bulgaria, but also by Bulgarians who were shocked and pleasantly surprised that somebody, a Westerner, was writing fiction set in their country. I guess I described it okay. They didn't complain. Someone said, "Oh, you didn't spell this correctly. Oh, you explained this tradition slightly wrong." But on the whole, they were glad to see this novel.
Well, so the title is Valley of Thracians, and we see a picture on the cover. For those of you that are just listening, there is a picture of a mountains and a valley. Are we looking at the Valley of Thracians? Is that a real place, or is that a fictional place?
Okay, so that is one of the many scenes in Bulgaria of mountains. You can see that scene so many places. There's so many green forested mountains. Thracians, as a word of explanation, the Thracians were a militant tribe who ruled in the Balkans and Bulgaria 4,000 years ago, before the Romans. They ruled in the area. They are long gone, obviously, but their tombs and traditions are still, you can find their tombs all over Bulgaria. Bulgarians are very proud of their Thracian heritage, even before the Romans came and conquered. The book is not a historical book. It doesn't deal with prehistory, but it does mention Thracian artifacts, because you can see them today in Bulgarian museums, and Bulgarians are very proud of this heritage. So Valley of Thracians, it's a fictitious name because there is no Valley of Thracians in Bulgaria, but the valley represents the nature, the Bulgarian countryside, and Thracians, it relates to some of the artifacts that are mentioned in the book.
That's really interesting.
Very.
And I didn't know anything about Thracians. I don't think,
I don't think much about them in history.
No, I never think
I spent any time studying.
Nope.
Yeah.
Probably because they didn't take over the world or something.
That is true. That is true.
Right.
But
right.
They predated the Thracians. The Romans. The Romans did come to Bulgaria, and there are many Roman ruins in Sofia and Plovdiv, but this was much earlier.
Well, maybe it's an indication as to how peaceful the people were.
The Thracians?
The Thracians.
No, the Thracians were not peaceful. They were
not.
They were militant tribes.
That's right. You said militant tribes. Yeah.
Yeah. Some say might be true or not. Some say that the Thracians invented yogurt. Why? Because they used to carry milk in the saddlebags of their horses. They used to march on, and the milk would ferment as they took place in Milton marches as they went on their campaigns. Many people credit Bulgaria with the introduction of yogurts. Bulgarians would say, well, it's been here for 4,000 years. We did invent yogurt, even in the modern era, but some say the Thracians invented it.
Wow. That's crazy.
So Bulgarians are a little bit like Russians. They invented everything.
Yes.
Very good. That's really fascinating. So, do you know who the other peoples were there besides the Thracians? If they were like a tribe, that was marching through Bulgaria and overtaking different parts of the country.
Who they were fighting against, I cannot be sure. But there were many tribes. 4,000 years ago, obviously the situation all over the world, but certainly in the Balkans, was tribes, and they formed alliances, and one of the alliances became the Thracians. Whether they had one Thracian king or many, they certainly had so many tombs that they may have had many important people all across the country. Whether it was one tribe or many tribes, they did battle against each other.
Well, good. I'm glad that you explained that, because that's something I really didn't know about. I don't think I do know a lot about Bulgaria.
No.
I can find it on the map, but
Okay.
I don't think I know anything about it, to be honest. But that's really interesting, because Lord knows 4,000 years ago we had many, many, many tribes that here in the United States, which we effectively marched them out of existence.
Yes.
Unfortunately.
The,
All right.
The novel is not historical. Anyone who thinks otherwise.
Not historical. No, we're just talking about why. History does interest me so much, and I did want to know that, and I think that that's fascinating. And there are, as you said, Thracian artifacts do come into play in the story, but just artifacts, folks. Nothing to do with history. It's modern. It's a peace worker, right?
Did you bring any of your experiences when you lived there and traveling around? Did you bring those experiences into the search for the grandson?
Definitely, most definitely. In all my fiction set in Bulgaria, this book and the other two books I've written, people are experiencing, many of the characters are experiencing Bulgaria for the first time. They've never been there. They're either visiting as tourists on a short-term visit, or similar to myself, they're on a relocation coming to Bulgaria and learning to live in Bulgaria. So yes, some of the experiences I had visiting certain sites, whether it's in Sofia or other places in Bulgaria, come into play in Valley of Thracians, in my other books, that will show somebody, oh, this is an introduction to that particular place or culture or tradition or piece of history. Definitely.
Fabulous.
Cool.
That's really good. I do have a question to ask you, and I know that you listen to our program, and so it's one you'll recognize. Are you a plotter or are you a pantser?
Okay, so two of my books were novels. My latest book is a collection of short stories. I think the answer is probably different between novels and short stories. I'll start with the last part, short stories. I think I can envision a short story in its entirety before I even start, meaning there is no outline to handle because I know what the short story is going to be. It's an introduction and an end, of course, but I can envision it in its totality. And then I start writing to make sure my dream becomes what I wanted to portray on paper, on the screen. Novels, I think, are a different way to go about it as an author or someone who wants to be an author, because you go about it differently. Yes, in many ways, it's like an outline, but I think I've adopted something that I learned from the author John Irving. John Irving, I read an interview with him that he says one of the first thing he writes in a novel is the ending. Is the ending. I can't give you the exact quote, but I've seen it more than once attributed to him. And that's basically when I started my novels, I not only thought of the beginning, what the premise was, but I already saw the end. So here, the first novel, Valley of Thracians, a Peace Corps volunteer goes missing in Bulgaria. His grandfather comes to look for him against all odds. That was the premise. That's what I came up with. But then I also came up with the ending. So I'm not going to reveal the ending.
No spoilers.
No spoilers.
Whether that is considered an outline or not, but that's how I would consider writing a novel. Come up with the premise.
Sketchy.
Yeah, it's not really an outline.
Yeah.
I mean, we know people who actually outline and plot everything.
I like to call them anchor points.
Yes.
Because you need to put a pin, like a pin in the thing and see. At least you're following the track,
Yeah, that I have never done.
Yeah.
We need to take a commercial break.
Commercial break.
And we'll be right back. Don't go away.
Don't go away. We got a lot more to talk about.
We do.
This novel, set against the backdrop of the English Civil War, explores love and survival amidst the chaos of war. It combines historical events with personal narratives, highlighting the impact of conflict on individuals and families. England, 1642. When bloody civil war breaks out between the king and parliament, families and communities are driven by different allegiances. Red Winter Journey is a sweeping tale of adventure and loss, sacrifice and love, with a unique and unforgettable story of a mother's love for her son at its heart. A historic journey of twists, turns, and a dash of spirited passion.
I finished reading the book a couple of days ago. It was a great read. The plot was indeed compelling, and I loved the conclusion. What I particularly enjoy in Paul's novels is his vivid recounting of historical details as to the social and cultural sides at the time. His characters are very likable and relatable.
It's 1919, and Eric Laska returns from the war in Europe. Two new enemies await him in the small, coal-mining town he calls home. One is a threat to his relationship with Rebecca, the love of his life. The other, a bloodthirsty beast, is stalking the mining town residents. The townspeople suspect Eric of one of the killings. An old man and Rebecca's 11-year-old sister have seen the beast, but only Eric believes their story. To protect the town and clear his name, he's forced to prove the werewolf exists. Available on Amazon. The Horror Within by Marjorie Swift Doring.
Many secrets are hidden within the darkness of the jungle. Now comes part 4 in the Jaguar series by retired Hollywood scriptwriter George Dismukes. In this saga, Brandon, Andrea, and Naja, the Black Jaguar, go deep into the Mato Grosso jungle on a mission to rescue 2 kidnapped children. During their journey, they encounter many dangers, including Yanomami Indians, bent on revenge for the murder of one of their warriors.
Return of the Jaguar is book 4 in the Jaguar series, starting with 2 faces of the Jaguar, the Lost City, and the Jaguar's Quest. All 4 are available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and other bookseller websites worldwide. Return of the Jaguar is a must-read.
And we're back.
We are.
All right. So the second book that you wrote is The Burgas Affair.
Yes.
You want to tell us a little bit about that book?
During the 2 years my wife and I lived in Sofia, we were welcomed as Israelis. We were welcomed as Jews. Everyone, we didn't hide our identity. We felt no anti-Semitism in Bulgaria. In fact, many times talking to co-workers, to taxi drivers, we were surprised that they knew somebody in Tel Aviv, they had a relative here. So the connection has always been a good connection between Bulgarians and Israelis, between Bulgaria and its Jewish population, which is today very small. We never felt endangered living there. Coming back to Israel, I remembered our Bulgarian experience as very safe. That's why I was so shocked when in 2012, a suicide bomber detonated his bomb in the Burgas airport. This is a city on the Black Sea, killing 5 Israelis and their Bulgarian bus driver, as well as himself. This was the first terrorist attack in Bulgaria in modern days. There were some in Bulgarian history. This attack is assumed to be the work of Hezbollah, and everyone knows Hezbollah is again today in the news all the time, Hezbollah in Lebanon. It was the perpetrators who sent this bomber to his death to kill innocent Israeli tourists, and their Bulgarian bus driver were never found, were never punished. This just sat in my mind. I said, how could this have happened in Bulgaria? Yes, there's so many terrorist attacks in Israel against Israelis. There's attacks all over the world. Bulgaria had always been safe. How could that happen there? So my creative mind began to work, wondering what would happen if Bulgaria and Israel would team up, a Bulgarian detective, an Israeli young woman from the Mossad, Israel's secret spy agency, would team up to go on the trail of those who sent the bomber to his death to try to find who was responsible. That was the premise for my second novel. What would happen? It's fiction. It's a work of fiction because it did not happen in this way, but no one has proved otherwise because the masterminds of that crime, of that murder, were never found. So that was the novel I wrote, again, envisioning the premise, knowing in my mind how it would end. The ending, in this case, I can reveal that it's not 100% conclusive because the real life story is not 100% conclusive. And that was the book. That was the Burgas Affair. Burgas is a city in Bulgaria. This is where the airport bombing took place. And it was a really bad, tragic event that affected Israel and Bulgaria at the time. So that's the premise of the Burgas Affair.
That's too bad that happened, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, it's too bad that it happens anywhere, but like you said, if they were living so peacefully, all different types of people, I mean, that really sounds kind of idyllic. I wouldn't mind living there if it meant that, you know, whatever you decide to pursue, your neighbor isn't going to tell you that you're wrong and you should be doing what they're doing. I think it's a good way to live.
This book, The Burgas Affair, was actually translated into Bulgarian. I made a connection with the leading Bulgarian traditional publisher. It's a my book is self-published, but the traditional publisher in Bulgaria said this book will appeal to the Bulgarian readership. It was translated into Bulgarian and was published there in 2016. The book was published first in Bulgarian and only later in English. It was because the publisher had actually seen a manuscript and not the book, the final version of the book. I was told by my Bulgarian friends and contacts that the writing in the book was not the way I would write it, not the way I spoke, meaning it was translated not only into the Bulgarian language, but also into the Bulgarian way of writing thrillers. So I have a copy. I've never read my book in Bulgarian, and I don't think it's currently on offer in Bulgarian bookstores, but it was definitely published in Bulgarian. So
that's funny.
Did you find it if you learned how to speak Bulgarian, right? Sort of.
took Bulgarian lessons, but it was very comfortable speaking in English. Our coworkers in international online marketing companies obviously were well educated. They spoke English. Our day-to-day life was in English, but we did have to learn some important phrases to communicate in Bulgarian. My wife had to order a taxi over the phone in Bulgarian to explain to the taxi driver where to pick her up. So you learn certain things. We had to shop supermarkets. You don't really need to know anything more, but to recognize a certain word or two. But one purchase I made, we needed a new mattress for our bed in our Sofia apartment. And I made that entire purchase, the negotiations and the payment, in a store in Bulgaria with a woman who didn't speak a word of English. And I was able to manage with pidgin Bulgarian, and the mattress was very comfortable. So I guess we made a good purchase. But you learn to recognize certain phrases, but we forgot everything because most of the time we spoke English. So coming back to Israel, I can speak a word or two. When we went back to Bulgaria on visits, you could remember certain things that you once knew, but if you don't speak a language for basically 15 years, you forget it. It's not, but we never were proficient. Let's put it that way.
There you go.
Well, as I told you, I lived in Guadalajara for 3 years, and I did become very proficient in Spanish, and actually dreamt in Spanish and would often forget English words and try and figure out how to say it in English when people would come and visit from the States. And that was over 50 years ago. So now it's very difficult. I can still speak Spanish a little, but nothing like I did before. And there I did have to learn how to speak Spanish to go to the grocery store, because it was very different there back then, 57 years ago, that, I mean, there weren't big supermarkets there. There was the corner store, and then there was the marketplace. And so I was dealing with everybody in the market. It wasn't one big grocery store, and I had to know for each market what I was asking for. And believe me, there are some words in Spanish that you don't want to do the literal translation. So I learned that very quickly. And
there's one difference though. Both Spanish, the alphabet, the characters in the alphabet are similar to English. Bulgarian is similar to Russian. It's Cyrillic.
Cyrillic is different.
We not only needed to learn how to speak a few words of there, we needed to understand how to read words that were an entirely different alphabet and script. And like the backwards R is the Y, is like a Y character. And at first you don't, but then it sinks into your mind. Then you begin to recognize it everywhere. But it was difficult, very difficult at first.
We've had audience members from countries that, use Cyrillic, Russian, and in different places like that. And so the comments they make in Cyrillic, you're always like, wow, I'm not sure.
What is that?
Well, I mean, you recognize it as Cyrillic, but you also know that is so foreign, like you said, than the alphabet really is a different pronunciation, but it's the same alphabet if you're speaking a Romance language or a Germanic language. But if you're doing, anything Cyrillic or Japanese or Chinese or Korean, now you're talking a whole different ball game of trying to learn language.
Yes.
That's for sure.
Yes.
But it's still, I think it must have been, a lot of fun to be able to learn what you could learn.
It was a challenge. And even though we failed to learn Bulgarian, we managed very well in communication with our coworkers, with our friends, even with our neighbors. It was a challenge that we managed to succeed in doing that.
I know now with Google Maps and everything, it's probably very easy to get around. Did you find it difficult then traveling on highways and reading maps and so on?
Oh, yeah.
At the time, we didn't have, well, most of the time, let's start with this. In Sofia, we did not have a car. We traveled all the time by public transportation or taxis. But when we traveled in the countryside, we always, which entailed renting a car because we didn't own a car, we always asked for a car with GPS. There was no apps or whatever, Google or Waze or anything. We always asked for a car with GPS. So when we traveled, we relied on the GPS. But in many cases, GPS failed us. We would enter a Bulgarian city, a town which we had never been before, and we knew where we wanted to get to. So we programmed the GPS, and the GPS would say, turn left. And if we had turned left, it would have been off a cliff, and we would never have come out to our destination. Another time when we used GPS was when we were traveling. My wife and I took a vacation, a weekend in neighboring Macedonia. Macedonia is a very small country to the west of Bulgaria. And we were going there for a weekend. We did a lot of traveling in the region as well. And we again asked for a car with GPS. We crossed the border from Bulgaria into Macedonia, and the GPS stopped working. The GPS was not programmed to work in Macedonia.
Oh, no.
So when we arrived in Skopje, which is the capital city of Macedonia, and we knew we had a room booked at a bed and breakfast, there was no GPS to guide us. We basically had to make our way, stopping people on the street. How do you get to this address? Of course, not everyone spoke English. It was a challenge again, but that's how we traveled, with GPS. Today,
my mind is just thinking about signs and stuff would all be in Cyrillic.
Yeah.
And that's mind-boggling.
Actually, in Bulgaria, it's very nice that they provide signs in Cyrillic and English, So it's very easy. From that perspective, you will always be able to, on road signs, you will know even the entering villages and highways, everything is in two languages. From that perspective, it's very easy.
In Macedonia, was that the same, so that your hotel would have the name in Cyrillic and in English?
Yes. And so from that side, it was very easy to make your way around.
We don't do that here in the United States.
No.
It's in English.
Just English.
Yes.
Well, there are certain parts where it'll be in Spanish or Polish, depending on the neighborhood. But,
and not English.
and not English.
So then you're stuck.
But unless you speak that language.
Right.
But yeah. Well, actually, it's almost time for
let's go
our
ahead and
next set of commercials.
Yeah, why don't we get that?
When we come back, we're going to tell you how you can get in touch with Ellis, and we'll hear him talk about his third book about Bulgaria and his other books.
Yeah. All right. So we'll be right back, y'all.
Profiteers are preying on displaced souls who seek freedom, sacrificing everything, wanting to give their children hope and a future, but they wrongly trust on a roll of loaded dice. Teens are picked off and sold into slavery. Cartels offer the choice to strong young men to move illegal drugs over the border or die. The R Group and CATS team leaders want to end Mateo's inhuman business model. The heroes must derail the human exploitation and opioid epidemic, killing people in increasingly dramatic numbers. If they can save even a few from the jaws of death, they win. The present-day battle is in full swing, yet it can end badly for humanity unless the Enigma heirs triumph. Who will survive the onslaught, and how fast can they make Mateo pay?
Have you wanted to publish your story? Have you thought about self-publishing? Today is your day. 5-star Amazon review. Self-publish your ebook on Amazon for free in 2024. This ebook is available on Amazon by Becca L. Jones.
Paradise, my prison. Charlie Flint awakens from a deep sleep and finds himself alone on a tropical beach surrounded by a palm tree jungle and exotic animals. He cannot remember who he is or anything about his life. First, he must find food and build shelter and protect himself from hidden dangers. As his memory gradually returns, it reveals what a very flawed person he is. A man who made too many mistakes, made too many enemies. The implications of the truth are staggering. How did Charlie get there? And will he save himself? Paradise, My Prison is the riveting new suspense thriller from retired Hollywood scriptwriter George Dismukes. Paradise, My Prison by George Dismukes is available in jacketed hardcover, softcover, and all ebook formats worldwide.
And we're back.
Hello.
Okay, so this is your third book about Bulgaria.
Yes.
How do you pronounce that?
Rakiya.
Rakiya.
Yes.
And what does Rakiya mean? Is it a place? Is it a...
Rakiya is actually the traditional Bulgarian alcoholic drink.
Yes.
But Rakiya is obviously made by major production company, software. It's produced commercially, but let's put it this way. It's best when it's homemade by Bulgarians in their basements or garages, and it's high alcoholic content. This is Bulgarians drink Rakiya with their meals. They raise a toast to each other, looking each other directly in the eyes, saying "Nazdrave," which means good health to your health, and they take a shot of Rakiya. It is very strong and potent. One of the things I remember is drinking Rakiya for the first time, and we did it when my wife and I were at a fancy restaurant where we had a glass of wine, and then we said we have to taste Rakiya with our meals. We had a toast to each other, and I said to my wife, "This is not affecting me. It's not that strong." And then I stood up, and I was barely make my way across the room. It is very strong. I acquired a taste for Rakiya. Many of my stories in Bulgaria feature Rakiya in the background. It's the name of the book, of course, and the name of the title story. But it's one of the many things we learn to appreciate about Bulgarian cuisine and traditions, and I thought it was appropriate to use that as the title.
That's so interesting. What proof is it? Do you know?
I don't know what the highest proof possible is, but it's way up there. If it's homemade.
Probably 100 proof. Yeah.
Or 180 proof.
Is it like moonshine?
It could be. There's different versions of the same drink in Turkey and Serbia. In Italy, grappa, I think it's called in grappa in Italy. So there is similar drink made up of either grapes or plums or apricots or a mixture. In Bulgaria, it's mostly grapes that are the basis for the Rakiya drink.
Oh, that's
very strong.
Yeah, very like the same thing that wine and champagne is made from.
Yeah. But this is
very much stronger. Yeah.
Yes. 4.0.
No, okay. A glass of wine has never made it difficult for me to walk across the room.
Right. No. Or stand up.
Yeah.
And stay standing.
Yeah.
So how many stories are in Rakiya?
Okay. Rakiya is a collection of 12 stories. I've written many short stories after I wrote my 2 suspense novels, but the 12 stories in the book are stories set in Bulgaria because I had continued to be gravitated towards fiction set in Bulgaria. Some of the stories come from the voice of native-born Bulgarians. Some of them are in the voice or perspective of those visiting Bulgaria for the first time, either as tourists or similar to my story, being relocated on a work contract to live in Bulgaria. So the stories are very varied. Some of them are day-to-day situations involving different kind of people in Bulgarian society. The title story, Rakiya, is the story of two former best friends who participate in a competition in their village to see who can produce the best homemade Rakiya drink. So in Bulgaria, there's actually such competitions in Sofia, but I have not heard of such a competition being held in a village among people from that village who produce Rakiya on their own. So that was a fictional idea I had, and the story relates the competition between the two former friends and it explains how Rakiya is made. Another story is about a refugee from the civil war in Syria. This is a recent story, who moves with his family to Sofia because they want to escape the civil war in Sofia. And it tells about his life in Sofia as a foreigner, as a Syrian who's made his home in Bulgaria. Another story is about, similar to my story, is about an Israeli worker at a high-tech firm in their Sofia office who has left his wife back in Israel. His wife is 9 months pregnant, and his wife is about to give birth. And she says to her husband, who is in Bulgaria, you have to come home to be in Tel Aviv when the birth takes place. And he's ready to book a flight home. But then a volcano erupts in Iceland. So this is a true story about the volcano. So you're wondering, how does a volcano in Iceland affect someone in Sofia who wants to return to the birth of their child in Tel Aviv? Well, the true story is that the Icelandic volcano, and I'm sorry, I can never pronounce the name of that volcano, the ash and cloud of ash went east all across Europe, disrupting European air travel all across the continent, and airports closed down, flights were canceled. In Sofia, even, the airport was closed except for one flight that was still listed on the departure board from Sofia to Tel Aviv. And the man who's working in Sofia hopes to make that flight if it's not canceled to see the birth of his child. This is based on a true story, not only of the volcano, but my wife and I were living in Sofia when this volcano erupted, and our daughter in Israel was about to give birth, and my wife wanted to attend the birth of our granddaughter and had booked a flight that very night, and it was not clear if it would take off in time for her to make the birth. So again, I will not reveal the story, how the story ends, either in real life or, well, in real life, she actually did make it to the birth. But in the fictional story, I'm not going to give you the answer. You would have to read the story to know. So that is a story that's fictional, based on a true event, an actual event, and based in my life, my experience. So it is not humorous, but it's a real life story. Let's put it
right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, Rob's a retired air traffic controller, so we remember very well when that volcano shut everything down, because that was a worldwide event. I mean, it affected everyone.
Yeah, we always had to give volcanic ash advisories to all the pilots. You know, they needed to know where that was happening, because that can bring down a plane in no time. So, especially across Atlantic flights. You know,
there's one other story I would like to mention in the book, and that's the story Forgiveness, which is the longest of the short stories. It's not yet a novella, but it's a long short story. When my wife and I lived in Sofia, there was one thing we learned about Bulgaria that we had not known before, and it fascinated us. This is a period of Bulgarian history during World War II. Bulgaria was aligned with the Nazis. Bulgaria was on the Nazi side of the war. Yet its entire population of 50,000 Jews was saved. Not a single one was sent to the concentration camps. The entire Bulgarian Jewish community survived. And this was a fascinating story. We couldn't understand how Bulgarian Jews were saved when the Jews from every other country in Europe were sent to their deaths. That said, there were 11,343 Jews in Bulgarian-controlled territories in Macedonia. We mentioned Macedonia before, that were sent to their deaths when those areas were controlled by Bulgaria during the war. So this story fascinated me, and I knew that one day I would have to tell it in my writing. I knew I would never be able to tell it in my nonfiction because I'm not a nonfiction historical writer, but I would have to relate to it in my fiction in some way. And I'm not a writer of historical fiction, but I needed to tell this story. So the story Forgiveness, which is included in Rakiya, is a modern day story. It's the story of a modern day Israeli who is invited to a Bulgarian village to meet an old Bulgarian man who was a veteran of the Bulgarian army during World War II, who has a story to share, and that is the story of his life during World War II and his friendship with a man who turns out to be the grandfather of this Israeli. And it tells the story of what happened during the war years, both to the Israeli's grandfather, who was Jewish, and the Bulgarian army veteran, who of course was not, the one who risked being sent to the concentration camp. This is how Bulgarian Jews feared for their future. And the other one was given the role of a soldier sending some of those Macedonian Jews on a train to their death in the Polish concentration camp. So I told the story from two sides. I told a point of historical fiction, but from a modern day perspective. So this is one of the most meaningful stories to me in the book, and to many of the readers who have said it was very thought-provoking because it was a period of history that they knew nothing about.
No.
I've
never heard.
I never heard that, and that's true. They didn't send any of. That's remarkable.
Amazing.
It is. It's really
50,000 Jews before the war, 50,000 Jews after war. Afterwards, in the years following the war, most of them moved to Israel or to the United States or elsewhere in the world. Today, the Jewish population in Bulgaria is like 6,000. 6,000. That's all.
Wow. Well, I want to let you know how to get in touch with Ellis again. It's ELLISSHUMAN.blogspot, BLOGSPOT.com. So that's Ellis Shuman, blogspot.com. You can find all of his social media links there. And I assume a blog, since it's a blog spot.
Do you come out How often do you come out with the blog? Maybe weekly, or?
I try to do it weekly. The blog also has links to all my books, links to book reviews of my books and book reviews that I've written about other books. So it's
excellent.
It has a little bit of everything.
So we didn't get to talk about the virtual kibbutz, stories from a changing society, and we only have like 2 minutes left. So can you give us a 2-minute rundown on what the virtual kibbutz is about?
Virtual Kibbutz is a collection of stories based on the years my wife and I lived on a kibbutz in Israel's southern desert. I wanted to share those experiences with people not familiar with the kibbutz, so I did it through my fiction, collection of short stories. That was one of my earliest books, my first book to be self-published, of course.
That's wonderful. Yeah, I think people should read that for sure. Well, they should read all of your books.
Yes.
So, real quick, do you have anything on the planning board at this point and going through your mind, or?
As an author who's just published his latest book, a lot of my time is spent marketing the book, talking about the book, sharing the stories that I've just shared with you, whether it's about Bulgaria, whether it's about my connection to Bulgaria, my writing. That has taken priority in my life. I hope to return to writing fiction soon. Probably it'll be short stories and not novels.
Okay. All right.
So every author who's listening to this understands the whole marketing and why that takes you away from doing what you want to be doing. Yes.
For sure.
The never-ending marketing.
Right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to join us from so far away. We appreciate it. We learned a lot today. I did.
I did too.
Thank you very much for hosting me, giving me a chance to talk about these things.
Oh, it was
our pleasure.
Really?
Sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Really.
So we're going to move you over to the side here. Let's see if we can do that gently. There we go. Didn't hurt that much, I don't think. Want to remind everybody tomorrow or Thursday nights, WDJY FM 99.1 FM in Atlanta. You can catch our shows. Saturdays, 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time, episode rewind. You can see our old shows that way. And every Wednesday night, 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time, Meet the Author Live, just like right here where you're watching right now. So do you have anything else you'd like to add?
No, I think we've said it all.
Okay. Well, I guess until next time.
That's all, folks.
Bye.
Live every Wednesday, your Voice of Indie hosts Beam Weeks and Stephen Gees welcome authors, musicians, publishing industry pros, artists, and assorted creative guests for an exciting interactive hour. Call in during the show or post questions and comments on Twitter for responses in real time. Meet your favorite indie creators, learn inside tips, network, and promote your work. The link for each week's show is pinned on Twitter atop @VoiceOfIndie. And you can receive the link every Wednesday morning in your inbox by subscribing to our newsletter at freshinkgroup.com. Check out Voice of Indie every Wednesday on Blog Talk Radio and catch hundreds of episodes archived everywhere from our websites to our YouTube channel and Spotify.
Thank you for joining us here on Meet the Author. Make sure you stay up to date with our show by clicking like, follow, and share. And you can find us on Spotify, iTunes, and more. See you next time on WLFE